Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, If You're Passionate, Just Have a Go, with Nathalie Paris. We talk about her love for languages and how anyone can learn one, becoming self-employed and making her family nervous, and how French cheese is, of course, the best.
Nathalie was a secondary school languages teacher for 19 years with the responsibility for outreach primary languages teaching and transition from Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 3. Since 2014, she has been self-employed as a part-time primary languages teacher and is the owner of Nattalingo. She has spent the last 5 years telling stories on her French mobile library, teaching football skills in French, training teachers, supporting them with their own language teaching, blogging, podcasting and more. Thank you very much for joining us in a sunny Inspiration North headquarters. So, Nathalie, did you know what you wanted to be when you were a little girl?
I think I was fascinated by anything to do with biology and nature and science from being really little. And then I went into secondary school really enjoying those lessons. But then I looked into it and found out that everything to do with science seemed to be very practical. And I was never very good with my hands and practical things. Theory's fine, but just anything. And I thought, I don't want to work in the lab. I don't want to do experiments. So that's not going to work. So then I always loved books. So I thought, I could be a librarian. And when I looked into what you had to do in France to become a librarian, it's the same training you do to become a teacher, and it's very competitive. So you could become a librarian, or you could spend years taking the exam over and over again, not get anywhere. And at that point, because I'd always liked children anyway, I thought I might as well just go and be a teacher. And I thought maybe teach science, but again, it was just how I was going to get there. I wasn't going to be the right thing for me. So I wasn't really sure until I was about 16, and something happened in an English lesson. Because the English teacher asked a question and I knew the answer, and he said, "How do you know this answer?" And I said, "I don't know, I just know it." And he said something like, "Oh, some people just have a gift, or some people just like know things." And I thought, maybe that's me. Maybe I'm like good at this English thing. So then I decided to go and study English at university, which was, even though at that point my main subjects were still science in French, the curriculum, even up to A level to the baccalaureate, is so wide. I was still learning English, so I could still decide to go and study English. So that was perfect. A lot of people tried to talk me out of it, but I was like, no, that's what I want to do. So I did 2 years, and at the end of the 2 years, during the second year, I applied for the year abroad. In the meantime, I'd met someone, it was through my auntie. My auntie was still in touch with her old pen friend from when she was little. So she put us in touch together, and I'd come and visit. And they wanted a French assistant in their school. They'd had some bad ones helping them out. And she said, would I go and work in their school? So for my third year, I applied to go and work in her school in England, in Warrington. And at that point, I was just having my year out, going back. And towards the end of that first year in England, they said, well, actually, would you consider staying for another year? And I thought, I might as well. I was still studying. I was studying by correspondence, so I could finish my degree whilst staying in England. Okay. So I might as well have another year here. It's all right. And I'll go back to France. And during that year, there was a shift I was thinking about the educational system in England compared to the educational system in France. But so what interested me most about the educational system in England was the pastoral side of things. In France, the teachers don't do anything pastoral. There's no teachers that look after the pupils. There's no form teachers. It's other people get paid to do that. And I thought it was really much better here. And I wanted to be a form teacher. I wanted to do this pastoral work, support the children. So I applied to do my teacher training in England at Manchester University because I was in the Northwest, and I applied to do my teacher training in France. I was accepted on both courses. In France, they offered me money to do it. In England, they didn't. And my mum was desperate for me to go back to France and train, and I was like, no, it's better with me just staying here. So I stayed. So this was in 1995 I started my teacher training. So in 96 I qualified as a teacher, got my first job in Liverpool, and could not understand a Scouse accent.
That was my next question.
So I got the job and I thought, right, Brookside. We still had Brookside at the time.
Yeah.
So I spent the whole of my summer watching every episode of Brookside that came out, and I could understand the people talking on Brookside. So I was ready. Hillwood Comprehensive School, I am ready for you. Walked in the door and I still could not understand the children. It was just a different world. So, but I loved it. I stayed there for 3 years. But by then I decided to get married, and my future husband, who was a Geordie, did not like Liverpool. He didn't settle there at all. And I was quite happy to move and settle in the northeast and, bring up little Geordies or, have a northeastern accent. So I thought, that's fine. So I got the job at Kenton School in Newcastle. So this was in 98. And he got accepted to do his teacher training course in Durham. So that's how I ended up in Consett. So moved to Consett because it was like nice between Newcastle and Durham, and ended up staying at that school 16 years.
Wow.
It was, I really struggled to settle at first in the northeast, and just, getting married, having my first child and everything. I found that quite challenging. And because I was in Consett, I was away. It seems like close enough to Newcastle, but too far away. It was an effort to go into Newcastle, so I didn't really connect with colleagues outside of school to start off with. But then they just had amazing opportunities at that school, because it was such a big school, which at first I struggled with as well, because you could not know everyone. And
Sorry to interrupt you, but how did you learn Geordie?
Pass. Must be all that time with little children. My best Geordie phrase is, "Well, you on a boot, man?" I learned that from.
So we didn't watch any. And what was the program with Ant and Dec?
Or Biker Grove.
You didn't watch any Biker Grove to learn the language.
That's probably a bit.
No,
earlier
maybe
the
to
90s.
French ears. Maybe a northeastern accent is easier to understand than a Liverpoolian Scouse accent. I'm not sure.
So sorry to interrupt you. It's talking about getting involved in opportunities being Kenton School.
So then I realised at the school that because it was so big, I would never know all the children we had. It was like the 11th biggest school in the country at that point. I'd never know all the children. I'd never know all the staff. But I got to do things like do a counselling course, level 2 and level 3 in counselling at night time for free. I got to do coaching in the workplace course, got involved in coaching other staff in school. And that's on top of all the language related opportunities that I had, and in terms of leadership and everything. It was just like, in that respect, being in that school was really amazing. And one of the opportunities starting about 2004 was, my head of department said to me, would I be interested in going into primary schools and supporting the work of the primary school teachers who were teaching French, our feeder schools. We had 9 main feeder schools. And I'd done some of that in Liverpool already, and I'd loved it. And I thought, oh, yes, please. She says, well, you'll have to stop teaching A-level, though. I was like, that's okay. I'll go into the primary schools and do that. And that came on my timetable. And it was on my timetable every year for half a day or a full day a week. And I could just go and support and do that work. And ended up helping with citywide training. I was in a team of they were called ASTs, so the specialised teachers who just did this and just got to meet loads of people. That was amazing. So fast forward sort of, 16 years, the 15 amazing years. And in the 16th year, I thought, I cannot do this teaching to the exam, this GCSE. It was just, it didn't sit right with me anymore. I wanted to teach more of the language as it was and trying to give the children passion for the language rather than turn them off because of trying to jump through hoops that exams have to. That's what happens with exams. And that coincided. So I started getting restless 2013. And in 2014, it was becoming a compulsory part of the primary curriculum that all schools had to offer a language from the age of 7, 8, year 3. And I thought, right, I'm either going to do this now and make this my job because that's my favourite part of the job, or I'll never do it. So it was just one of those. And whilst I was trying to plan for this, I came across this book that I had written when I very first started teaching in Liverpool. So that was going back 16 years plus, where I'd written about how was there a way I could actually make this primary work, my job? And I'd totally forgotten about it, but that's how far back it had gone. But then it was opportunities reminding me of how much I liked it. So I decided had no idea about self-employment whatsoever. Nobody in my family's ever been self-employed. It's a family of teachers. And teachers, my granddad and my granddad and my dad's side, grandma and my mum's side, did teacher training together. My parents were both teachers. I got one of my brothers as a teacher. That's all I'd ever been surrounded. And in my family, it just wasn't done. And I just knew that I didn't want to do what I was doing anymore, but I still wanted to work in schools. So I decided to just email loads of schools, just got an email together and did a little flyer with my dad that I just gave out. I started going to little meetups. They were called mumpreneur gatherings, in concerts. They don't exist anymore, but they had funding at the time. So I went to one of those every month, just first couple of months. And so they set me up with HMRC and explaining to me what it all involved. But anyway, I got 4 schools that said, we'll have you, coming in every week and teaching French for us because, we've got to offer this on the curriculum, but we can't, our teachers can't. So I was like, get in, that's it, that's brilliant. So I started 5th of September 2014. So I just launched my self-employment career. And the hardest thing about it, I felt ready, but it was my mum just couldn't cope. My mum was just like, how are you gonna pay your bills and all of this? And I was like, I've got to show her that I can do this. I think that was it. It's like certain people's expectations. If you've not grown in that environment of self-employment and taking risks, if it's all been all safe, so that made it hard for me. I felt pressure from there. And so I did the first few months, and then I was like, look, this is how much money I'm making, how much work I'm getting. And then I started teaching this, and then I'd had this mad idea. I suppose it goes back to wanting to be a librarian when I was younger as well, of opening a library, a French library somewhere, because I had so many French books. My children's old books that they'd had from being little, they were just filling up the house, loads of my books. And I thought, I could open a French library, just make people share these with people. But that was a secret. And one day at the end of a conversation with my best friend Carol, I actually told her, I said, look, I've got this mad dream. And she said, well, what you want is a mobile library bus. And I was like, yeah, that is light bulb moment. This is what I want, because then I can get the books to the schools. I'm not relying on people coming to me. So that came as an afterthought, you know, as part of the self-employment. At first, I was just going to be a self-employed teacher, just do regular teaching in schools. I had my 4 schools sorted, and then this came in, and I started looking for a bus and developing the idea. And then, so that was September, and it got to Easter, and one of my schools had loads of problems. And then one day I got pulled into the head teacher's office and got told that was it. I didn't have a job in that school anymore. And I was doing 1.5 day a week in that school. So that was that was big. And by that point, I had started to set up, I had the bus and that started. So I was like, right, that just means I've got more time to just give this a real, you know,
It's sign, isn't it?
It was exactly, because that was April, and basically that meant I was able to launch the bus in May, because I'd bought the bus in January. It would have taken a lot longer if I hadn't lost that work. It's a lot of the time is what happens, I find, you know. There'll be, I know it's a cliche, but they say like one door closes and another one opens, and you've just got to just make the most of situations, really. So I thought that's how I looked at it. Right, okay, I was shocked once I got over the shock, which was like the point where I just managed to prove to my mum that I could do it. That's when I lost the job. That was just like, just give us another challenge. So I said, right, I'm doing the bus. It's fine. So then she was panicking again, but never mind. I did it. So, and yeah, just taking it from there. So I can't believe it's been 5 years now. 5 years of self-employment, 5 years of things evolving, which is what happens, I suppose, in people's jobs. Things change, but maybe when you are self-employed, it changes more in that you're constantly just reviewing things. Well, if you're self-employed and you invest in yourself and think about things like planning, and if you're still learning all the time, I think that's what happens, and you question things and take opportunities. So now I only work in 2 schools on a regular basis, and that's on a Monday and a Tuesday. And I also work in a nursery, but that's just 1 term a year. But I love it. It was like the first time that was another opportunity. It was somebody I know who used to be a secondary school teacher, found herself head of a nursery through family, really bad things happening. And she just went, right, would you come and teach our little ones, 2 and 3 year olds?
Oh, wow.
Like, okay, I'm secondary trained. The first time I had to go into a year 1 class of, 5, 6 year olds, that was like hard. Now I'm being asked to teach 2 and 3 year olds. Because the children I work with most of the time are year 3 to 6, 7 to 11. I says, look, because it's you, Laura, I'll do it. But if I don't like it, I'll just tell you, and I know people who do this all the time. So I'll just, give it a go. First, I'd say 3 to 4 weeks. This was an hour, 2 half-hour sessions, and I would go home with a headache, like of the sheer concentration of like, I want to get this right, and I want to talk to the children in a way that makes sense to them. 2 and 3 year olds, I wanted them to get a sense of what France meant, was speaking French meant, not just go in and say random words. So I thought it was genius. My first lesson, I'd prepared this presentation. I just wanted to show them photos and everything. Arrived at the nursery, and there was a PowerPoint presentation. You couldn't show a PowerPoint presentation. So I was like straight away thrown in at the deep end, right? You got to do something else. So for instance, I just used toys. So I'd tell them that if we were going to go to France, we had to cross the sea. and say, right, so how are we going to cross the sea? Can we cross the sea in our car? And talk about, well, the children tell you can build a bridge. I says, no, it's too far, it's the sea. And working out, different ways to travel just to try and give them a sense of things. So anyway, it was a very steep learning curve for me. But I found that then I loved it. And I've been doing that nursery for 5 years. And when it gets to the end of the term, because they do a cycle of different things at the nursery, I'm just like, oh, I don't want to go. I just want
miss the little ones.
Yeah. Because, well, they tell you how it is as well, when they're young and they can talk. There's no escaping. It's like the questions.
Immediate feedback.
And the questions they ask. And it was also really good for me in terms, I remember one of the first groups I had, I just thought, actually, am I doing this right? There was this little boy, he just seemed all over the place all of the time. And I was thinking, is there really even a point in being here? Like questioning what I was doing with them and what they were getting from it, being in my lessons. And then one day I bumped into this lady and she said, you teach my little boy French at the nursery. It was that little boy, says, well, he comes home and he's like speaking French and he's doing this and wanting to show stuff. And I was like, that's okay, that's all right. Sometimes you just need that reassurance, don't you? Yeah. That's another thing. If you're doing something that you love and you want to do a good job, you end up questioning yourself. You challenge yourself, but you want to do it right. Sometimes you'll just go, oh, I'm not sure about this. But then there'll be a little thing like this happens that reminds you or will reassure you that it's all right, you're making a difference, you're actually having an impact. And that was my bit. The other one that has come to me rather than me looking for it is I'm now teaching at Newcastle University on a Monday night and a Tuesday night. And that was last summer. Got an email, one of the mums from the French school where I teach on a Saturday morning. I suppose that one as well was like, Nathalie, do you want to come and teach, at our school? I can't remember how people found out about me for that one. I suppose if you're doing half a decent job as a self-employed person, you portray yourself out nicely, then people will spot you and might come and say, actually, would you like to help with this? But the Newcastle University, I never thought in a million years I'd ever teach at a university. Got the email of one of the mums from the French school. She was in charge of this certain program at the university. Was I interested? I had a chat with her for about an hour and I said, yes, I'm interested. And now, I teach there on the Monday and a Tuesday night.
And which students you're teaching?
So the students, they do all sorts of courses. It's like fascinating. Some of them have no idea what they study. I don't understand it. I've got, and they're doing French as an extra. So they choose, it's not part of their course. They can get extra credits, but it's not part of their main degree. So I've got students in medicine, civil engineering, all sorts of science things, and English literature, just anything. There could be any of them. And that was another challenge for me in October when I started there. So I suppose it's taking those opportunities but you've got to decide if it's right for you or not. And when you start, you don't know, do you? And just like at the nursery when I started it, so it had been by that point 14 years since I'd taught A-level. And suddenly I was teaching A-level and adults again. Some of them were members of staff that come. And after the first session with these academics, quite serious people. I'd gone from my primary school, my little children, driven to the university, and then I had this group and I was like, I'm not sure if this is right for me. But I've said I would do it, so I'll do it. And it's like, you're not going to like everything that you try, and not everything that you do is going to work out. But in this case, it was like with the little ones, is getting into it, finding your feet, getting to know your audience really, and then so now I'm fine. I'm preparing the first exams.
Oh wow!
It's another
so you're going
challenge.
from 2 and 3 year olds to medical students effectively?
Yeah, so the same, like on a Tuesday,
Yeah.
I start at 9:30 with those 2 and 3 year olds, and at the end of the day at 7 o'clock with,
Which
adults.
is it more difficult to teach adults or the 2 and 3 year olds?
Good question.
He's full of mischief when he's asking that question.
The preparation for the adults is hard. I find harder. The questions that the adults ask are trickier, and they really, like you, James, they really do challenge me and really get me thinking about my own language and grammar points and certain things. Why do you say this and not that? And which the children are easier to answer. It's easier to answer their questions.
Yes.
The behaviour of the 2 and 3 year olds is much harder to I'm lucky that I do enjoy all of it, and I wouldn't do any of it if I didn't. And for me, it's all about the love of French or another language. Just happens to be French in my case now. I've done a lot of German and Spanish in the past, but seems to be mainly French now. So with the little ones, it's giving them those first the feel of the language, what it's like to make different sounds with your mouth, finding out about different places, and not everybody drives on the same side of the road, because I love a little lesson where we set up chairs and we go on a trip to France, and we can look at photos, and I can show presentations now. And then when we get to France, we get on the train, the magic train that goes under the sea, we'll go on the Eurostar or in the tunnel. And when we get to France, we're like driving on the right side of the road, we're not driving on the left, all those little things, just to give the children that awareness, and everything in between up to the adults that just they know. The ones I teach have roughly got a GCSE in French, and they want to take it further. They've all got different reasons for wanting to do it, but they already know they like the language, so that's easier.
Yes.
But it's just making sure that you can answer their questions and push them further, and that they are going to keep really enjoying their language learning. So that's what I suppose it's about for me, is just sharing that, the language and the love and the open-mindedness that goes with it at all ages. So,
Do you think that anyone can learn a language? Because often I might speak to people and they'll say, "Oh no, I can't learn a language. I'm not inclined that way." Or I always remind them, "Well, you're speaking English." So there's a starting point. But do you need? So the first question, I guess, is, can anyone learn a language? And the second bit is almost, but do you need to be passionate about the language if that is the case?
I think that everyone can learn it, but like many things in life, we're not all equal. Some of us are going to find it a lot easier than others. And then it's about why for an adult, if we're talking about adults, can you all learn it? Children find it easier because they're still learning English anyway, so it's become sort of part of it all. It's just language learning in general. But when you're an adult and in that mindset of like, I can't do it unless you have a motivation, a reason why you want to do it, it's not going to work. But mindset anyway, that works in
Everything.
and any learning situation. If you tell yourself you can't do it, then the chances are you'll not be able to do it. But then if you have that motivation, if you know why you're doing it, if you have a goal, then that helps so much. I'm just thinking of a particular person I know. I don't teach him, but I know he's been learning Spanish. I sent him to this lady to learn Spanish, and at first he went in saying, I can't be taught. And he's learning and he's finding it hard. It's very challenging for him. He's not a natural. Some of us are more natural and it's easier for some of us than others. But he's sticking with it, and he's been to Spain and now he knows why he's doing it. And that's it. Is if you've got that why, and I know he'll never be fluent, but he'll end up being able to go to Spain and communicate with people. To me, that's like the main thing. The language, it doesn't have to be to be perfect. And people get hung up, a lot of British people get hung up on masculine, feminine. I forgot the right word, I never got the right agreement. And in 99.9% of cases, 99.99999%, it won't matter. You'll still, your message, just say it. Yes. The message will get across. If it's not perfect, you'll still communicate what you want. You'll understand people. You might not understand everything, but you'll get the gist of it. To me, language is about communicating. And if you manage to communicate either a thought or ask for something, or, you're making the effort, then any age, any level, if that person is trying to learn it, and if it's not perfect, then it doesn't matter. They're learning, they're giving it a go, and they're using what they have learned. I tell the children and the adults the thing. I think it's Nelson Mandela supposed to have said something like this, that if you talk to someone in a language that they understand, so I say, you speak to me in English, I can understand in my head, can make sense of it. But if you talk to me in French, then you're talking to my heart, and there's that deeper connection. If you're making the effort to talk to someone in their native language, they just feel special. That's how I say to the children, that makes me feel really special. You're making an effort. And I say to them, if you think, I'm going, a typical one will be, I go on to Spain for my holidays, but they all speak English there. I says, why do you think they do? Why do you think they learn English? Because they know a lot of English tourists are going to come, and if they speak English to you, they know you're gonna go back to their restaurants or their shop because they're communicating with you. They're gonna sell more to you. Yes. I says, however, if you bother to learn Spanish before you go to Spain, you've got the upper hand, and they're going to feel special if you start saying something to them in Spanish. Little children, people love it in restaurants. If the children have a go, I says, that's when you'll get the better deals. You'll get the free stuff. That's when you'll get,
everyone likes free stuff.
Because people just go, oh, look, there's not many of them that do make the effort. Yeah. The others just take it for granted. They'll just go, oh, this cute little child is speaking Spanish to me. He has a free ice cream. They do it. Yeah. So sometimes I just present it to them like this. The communicating side of it doesn't have to be perfect, and also that emotional connection that you make with people if you speak to them, in their own language.
No, it's wonderful. I've got a 10-year-old, and I did French and German A levels, like James did, bizarrely, and we do try and sort of teach him words and phrases in both languages. But my French is significantly better than my German, which is weird because I lived in Germany in English schools and stuff. But James, his language ability, we talked about it a bit in his podcast, but he speaks 3 languages and he's learning Spanish at the moment. I don't know why I'm telling everybody this for you, but the question is to you, Natalie. So we know you sort of hinted there that you have this gift, and you were told as a youngster that you had this gift for languages. So how many? What can you do, I suppose, is the question.
In different languages. Yeah. So I didn't want to learn English, I'll be honest with you. When I started secondary school, I didn't have the opportunity to learn as a young person. I wanted to learn German because I had cousins in Germany and they didn't speak French. Even though my uncle was French, he never spoke French to them. So I wanted to learn German so I could communicate and play better with my cousins. Yeah. Simple as. Mum and Dad were like, no, you're learning English. So I hated English. I had a teacher that only spoke English in the lesson, which is why I think in most cases the full immersion thing that's so artificial with children and especially teenagers doesn't work, just because I had such a bad experience of it. I had no idea what was going on in the lessons. We were only allowed to write things in our books in English, no translation, no links to French, and I was just lost. I hated it. To me, it doesn't.
You need to know what the word is in French or English to sort of translate in your head, don't you?
Because, I think so. 'Cause when you learn your native language, obviously you don't understand anything, but that is a natural full immersion thing. When you're going to go in a classroom for 2 hours a week and just hear a different language all the time, that's not enough for you to pick up all the clues and the signals. So I struggled for 2 years. Then I was allowed to do German as well. I couldn't stop English. Then I had an English teachers that were better teachers. Loved German, went on exchanges. I wanted to go and live in Germany, basically. Yes. My mum and dad wouldn't let me go by myself when I was 16. And then I went to college, and I was still doing both English and German. But when I got to college, I realised that our German teacher at secondary school who told us we were amazing at German had lied to us. We were rubbish. We'd learned nothing, next to nothing, compared to everybody else. Yes. So we really struggled, like all the children that came from my school found it hard. I still enjoyed it. I still loved it. And it's not until that English teacher said this about English that I thought, actually, I'm better at English, and maybe this is the way. And maybe it was easier to surround myself with English in terms of like songs and finding an English radio, you know, and well, we didn't have the internet in those days. Remember those days? Yep. We didn't have internet. I'm older. But all I had was BBC World Service for radio. And then songs on the radio. I used to have to buy magazines if I wanted to have the words to certain songs. But I did learn a lot like this, and I suppose there was more around me. I still loved English. Did a degree in English and still loved German. Did a degree in English and German. So that's my main three. And then it was about. It's when that's what it was. When my two were little, I brought them up bilingually, so they both speak fluent French, and you know, had loads of books so can read it and stuff. And I don't believe in regrets, but I still feel bad. I've apologized to my son for this, but I still think, what if I hadn't done this? My Max, who's see, we're talking about not everybody being equal. My Max is a natural linguist. He'll pick up any language, he'll go anywhere. My Leah, I call my reluctant bilingual. She's only bilingual because she had no choice. And that wasn't from me, that was Max would not let her not speak French to me. And Max he was 5. Yeah, Leah was a toddler. And he started making up his own language. He used to ask me things about German and gender and stuff. This is a 5-year-old. He was like really into it. And he started making up this language, and which in itself would be fine, except he would teach me it and then test me on it. I could not cope with that. I was working, teaching full time. I had a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old. I did not have time to learn a made up language. So I said,
like High Valerian.
Yes.
I don't know if it had a name or anything. I said, how about we all learn Spanish instead? So I bought some DVDs, like the BBC Musi DVDs things, and we started to learn Spanish. I didn't learn it properly until I was an adult. It was about 7 years ago or something, and I went on courses in Spain and all this. So then that was my next language. So I suppose the 4th one: French, English, German, and Spanish. And my next one, I'd love to learn a bit of Arabic, just to see what it's like. Arabic, I love the sound of. I'm from the north of France, and we've got big Arabic communities. So from being little, I could always hear Arabic. Which form of Arabic I do not know. North African Arabic, I don't know the different Arabic languages. I know there are loads of them, but some Arabic anyway. And just to experience learning a language that's not a European language, a different alphabet and everything. That's my next challenge.
That's exciting.
Just learn a bit of Arabic.
In your journey towards self-employment, have there been any pivotal moments?
I think apart from the one about the bus and my friend, you know, that light bulb moment when she suggested I had the bus, what sort of prepared me for this stage of my journey, my working life, I suppose, was when the father of my children suddenly died in a car crash. That was 2010. And So it's trauma, like we all go through trauma, don't we? And certain incidents, accidents, whatever you want to call them, just make you question things. And it's one of those is just think, well, you just don't know what's going to happen. So you might as well enjoy what you're doing, especially when it comes to work. So I suppose when I got to 2013 and I stopped, I knew that I wasn't enjoying being in the classroom, teaching what I was teaching as much. I just knew then that I had to do something else. I didn't want to be stuck in a job where I wasn't giving my best to the children anymore anyway, so I didn't want to do that. So having had that experience, I thought, yeah, I don't have to do this. I've got to find something else now. And it's and I feel so lucky now that I do what I do, because I love what I do so much and I have so much control. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not easy, you know, there's like ups and downs, but I have so much control over what I do and everything. Like this week's a very busy week in terms of hours, but every single thing I've put into my week, I chose to put in, and I put it in because there was a point in doing it, and because I wanted to do it, and that makes such a difference. There's nobody telling me do this and I think, well, what's the point in this? I'm just wasting my time. I've got deadlines, but they're my own deadlines. Is that freedom? So it's enjoying what you're doing, having found, you know, something I'm really passionate about, and I feel that I can share, you know, with people, and also having that freedom of doing it's on my terms. And when I want it, and if I want to have a day off, if I don't want to work one evening, I can just do it. You know, so it's that moment, you know, that accident happening in 2010. So when it got to 13, I was like, nah, there's more to another cliche, sorry, but there's more to life than this. I can't do this anymore. I've got to find something else. And then it's taking that risk, but just doing it, have it a go, and then see what happens.
Yeah, it's great. Just, and I'm sure our listeners and myself are really keen to understand, how's your mum on all of this? Is she still okay with you pursuing this line of business, self-employment?
She's found a new thing to bother me about. It's just the fact that I've not started paying into a pension. So she's shifted. She's fine. She's
That's
quite
another pivot from your mum.
Yeah, she's. I think she wouldn't say that she's proud. My dad is. She wouldn't say it, but I think she is secretly. You know. But it's that. Yeah, until I've got like a pension fund again, you know, that she knows of. So to 2020, I'm going to do that, and then she'll have nothing. She'll find something else to complain about. But that's okay. That's another story. But yeah, she has settled a lot more about it. Has to start somewhere.
Yes, it's almost that. Sometimes worriers will find anything to worry about, and if there's nothing to worry about, they just make stuff up to worry about.
My mum is one of those, like, totally.
There's nothing to worry about, so we have to worry about not worrying. Something bad's going to happen.
I wish I could remember the moment in my life when I realised that my mum was so unhappy because she was such a worrier. I just know that I didn't make that decision. I'm like, I'm not being like that. That is it. There's no way I'm making myself sick with worry like she does. And it worked. I wish I remembered that moment and I could tell people how to do it. Yes. Maybe you would know, Michelle, how to explain that one.
Yeah,
you know,
but it's the problem about being a psychologist is, you know, the theory, but whether, you know, I'm still a human. So is that like, I know. I understand, you know, about worrying and all that sort of stuff. But do I? Of course I do. I'm human like everybody else.
Well, good job we are.
Yeah, we haven't named what this quick fire round of questions is, and I ruined it by asking you one of them already, so I'll just make a new one up at the ground. So James, have you got a question for us?
Should we start with, if you could have any superpower, what would you choose and why?
Ooh, I would love to be able to understand all languages. You know, when sometimes I sit on the bus and I hear people speak to each other, and I'm not I promise you, I'm not a nosy person. I'm not like a stalker or anything like that. But it's just I would love to be able to just understand everything, not in terms of finding out information, just have that power of understanding everyone and what they say. Yeah, that'd be a cool superpower. Cool. And you could, and if I could understand and speak all the languages in the world, even better. Yeah. Could go anywhere and make yourself understood. Sorry, it's not very original when I'm a languages person, but I just thought that'd be like a...
You'd be in high demand.
Yeah, well, it'll be last week's guest now, when this goes out. She wanted to speak to all the animals, so...
Oh.
There's a bit of a theme.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. I had this, I was in London with my mum for a 70th birthday. It was a surprise thing. She absolutely loved it. She was just like, I've got to take her back. She's fallen in love with the city. And we're on this hop on and off bus at one point. And there was this family behind us, and the child was a bit noisy, and he was like screaming. And the mum said, stop screaming in this lady's ear, because we were just in front. And the little boy, he was year 2. He said, well, it doesn't matter. She doesn't even understand our language, because we were speaking French to each other. So I turned round. I did it very nicely, but just ended up having a conversation with the mum and the 2 children. One of them was learning, his older brother was learning French at school, as it happens, and could tell me like Joyeux Noël for Merry Christmas, and just saying to him that not to assume that because people speak a different language not to assume that they don't speak his language, and about how amazing language was in general, and how you could understand what other people say without them knowing that you could understand them if have that superpower.
It is such a
type
superpower.
Of thing. And I was hoping at the end of it that this little boy was just going to go away thinking, I want to learn another language, fingers crossed. I just thought, I can't just let him think we don't understand him. So that was a little...
It's probably a good lesson for him to learn, though.
Oh, his mum was really good about it, and saying how a lot of people speak more than one language, and that's like not the norm, that for people to just speak one and not learn another one. So
that's great. Okay, so this is my completely made up on the spot one, because I already asked you the last one. So it's going to be a question I asked James, actually, is if you won the lottery, £1 million, what would be the first thing you bought?
Before I answer this question, I used to play the lottery, and that year where I stopped enjoying teaching like I had for 19 years, so that 19th year, 16th year at my school, I stopped playing the lottery because I thought, just stop thinking, when I win the lottery, I'll do this. Because at the time I used to say, from doing the counselling and the coaching, that if I won the lottery, I would go and train to be a counsellor, do the diploma and do it properly. I said that for a long time. And I'd still like to do more. See, I've lost the pastoral side of things with doing what I do. I miss that. So it's something that I need to find in my job. I need to find another way of like helping people like this. What would I buy? Just now I need a new car. That's not very exciting. I'm not sure.
What kind of car would you buy if you had that £1 million? Would you go mental, or would you go something more practical?
I'd go in between, like a nice shiny thing, not too big.
A Lamborghini or stuff or anything.
No, but something that would say, Nathalie's doing well, but not like too flashy. Yes. But that would just look like nice, and I would keep that one clean because my car is like terrible state at the moment. I suppose. Yes, because I've tried to go away from the mindset of like, if I did this, so it's hard, but I will have any money anybody wants to give me and to make my life easier, please do. I'd love to have, actually, if I could not buy something, what I would like to do, because schools struggle with budgets and things, I would love to have money to be able to do what I do, but without having to charge the schools. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yes.
Just be able to support do some supporting work without asking people to pay for it. So.
One option I was thinking of, you could say, I've got 500,000 in my pension pot now, Mum.
Perfect. Why did I not think of that? Yes.
Don't tell her about the other 500,000.
No.
Use that for living expenses.
Yeah, I'll just treat her 2 trips to London because she loves
bribe her with
London.
holidays. Brilliant.
Take her to the Ritz, all right then.
She must be doing well, so I'll stop giving her a hard time. So the last question. French cheese or English cheese?
Oh, French. How dare you ask?
I thought I knew what the answer would be. So.
My mum and dad are big cheese lovers as well, but they love a blue Stilton. So we take them blue Stilton over. But it's in terms of variety and, gooiness and smells.
Yes.
Come on. I come from near a place called Maroilles. It's very close, and that's one of the smelliest cheeses in France.
Is that the one you can't take on a bus?
Oh, yeah, and you just open the fridge and you can smell it. It's horrendous, but it tastes delicious. So I'm sorry. In England, I do buy, English, British cheeses. I love all cheeses. I'll not discriminate against, but French, I just
number
like,
one.
yeah, sorry.
We would know that would be that was inevitable.
Okay, so if we can get onto your time travelling mobile library bus and go back in time to speak to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give her?
I think because I grew up in an environment of, teachers, people that had always been in safe jobs with pension pots and good working conditions, or, sort of protected jobs and all this. Even more in France, you cannot lose your job as a teacher. It's a different system from here. That's what I thought I had to do as well. I felt that just felt normal. And I think what I try to tell my children and what I would tell myself as an 18-year-old is just have an open mind. You can do anything. Just go for it. Just don't think just take risks, and just if you know what you're passionate about, just give it a go. There are things you do to minimize risk and make sure you learn, you get facts and all the rest of it. I'm not saying just run and do anything, but it's just tell my 18-year-old self to not close those options of things that, self-employment and this type of work.
So thank you ever so much for coming to visit Inspiration North headquarters.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
Yes, thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Yes, and keep an eye out for the secret surprise we've got in a couple of weeks as well.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway.
And tell everybody.